Olivia walked down the stairs, feeling the bikini adjust to her body with each movement. The fabric, tight against her skin, seemed to highlight every curve. This is a true story, and to protect everyone involved, I'll change the names, but I'll try to stay as true to the original story as possible. First, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment. Olivia looked out the car window as the tall Florida palm trees passed by like shadows against the golden late afternoon sky. The family trip to Jake's parents' house was something her mother had been planning for years, but it had only now become a reality. She and her sister Emily hadn't seen their cousin since childhood, when they used to play together during summer vacations. Now, all grown up, that visit promised to be different. When Jake appeared at the door of the house, Olivia needed a moment to recognize him. He was no longer the skinny boy who ran around the yard years ago. Now, he had the athletic build of someone used to sports, with broad shoulders and an easy smile. He was the same age as her, 17, and had an intense gaze that made it hard to guess what he was thinking. Despite the time apart, he seemed comfortable, as if they had never lost touch. The Florida heat was suffocating, and Olivia felt the light fabric of her dress stick softly to her skin. Her blonde hair fell loose over her tanned shoulders, and the sun highlighted the delicate curves of her body, drawing subtle shadows on her summer golden skin. She noticed Jake's gaze travel over her for a brief moment before he looked away, and an unexpected shiver ran up her neck. That reunion promised more than just childhood memories. Smiling, Olivia suggested they take advantage of the sun and go straight to the beach. Jake and Emily agreed immediately, excited by the idea. While the two grabbed towels and sunscreen, Olivia hurried upstairs to find her bikini. When she finally found it at the bottom of her suitcase, she noticed a detail she hadn't anticipated. It was the same bikini she wore when she was 13. Now, with her body shaped by months at the gym, the piece seemed smaller, tighter than it should be. She put it on and looked at herself in the mirror, feeling the fabric against her skin and the contrast between the tight bikini and her more defined curves. She sighed, biting her lip. She had no choice. The ocean was waiting. Olivia came down the stairs, feeling the bikini adjust to her body with every move. The fabric stuck to her skin seemed to emphasize every curve, and for a moment, she wondered if she should have brought something newer. But there was no time to hesitate. Jake and Emily were already at the door, impatient to leave. The sun was shining brightly outside, and the promise of a dip in the ocean made any delay impossible. As soon as they got to the beach, Jake took off his shirt, revealing a body defined by surfing and hours outdoors. Olivia took advantage of her sunglasses to observe him without rushing, noticing his firm muscles and sun-kissed skin. For a second, she bit her lip, but quickly disguised the thought by tossing her hair back and stretching her arms, feeling the warm breeze against her skin. There was no denying that her cousin had changed a lot since childhood. With a mischievous smile, Olivia ran towards the water, calling the two to come with her. Jake laughed and went after her, but Emily just waved, preferring to spread out her towel and enjoy the Florida sun. Olivia didn't insist. The ocean was calling her, and the feeling of the waves on her feet was irresistible. Her red bikini contrasted with her white skin and her blonde hair, swaying in the wind as she surrendered to the freedom of that moment. Without a second thought, she dove into the warm water, feeling the refreshing shock against her sun-warmed body. The world outside disappeared, and all that mattered was the vast blue expanse before her. The warm water enveloped Olivia as soon as she dove in, leaving her refreshed. When she surfaced, she pushed her wet hair away from her face and looked for Jake, who was already swimming further ahead, moving easily against the waves. He was fast, cutting through the surface as if he were part of the sea. Olivia smiled, remembering when, as children, they would compete to see who could hold their breath the longest underwater. Apparently, he still took those things seriously. Determined to keep up with him, she swam a little farther from the shore, feeling her heart race with the excitement of the gentle current pushing her. The sea there seemed to have a life of its own, and with each stroke, adrenaline coursed through her body. Jake stopped and looked back, noticing that Olivia was approaching. He smiled challengingly, making it clear that he wouldn't let her beat him so easily. She accepted the challenge without needing words, but before she could react, a stronger wave came as a surprise. The impact was enough to pull the top of her bikini off, leaving her desperate to hold on to it. The moment she tried to adjust the fabric, She felt the current pushing her back. The sea was pulling her, and everything became confused until firm hands held her. In a quick movement, Jake brought her close to the sand, his strength contrasting with the fragility of the moment. When Olivia opened her eyes, she felt her body being supported in her cousin's arms. Her heart was beating fast, more from the fright than from the force of the water. It was then that she realized Jake was holding her bikini with one hand, while the other held her firmly against him. His fingers unintentionally touched her bare skin, creating a tension she hadn't expected. For a moment, everything was silent. Only the sound of the waves in the background and their panting breaths filled the air. As soon as they reached a shallower part where they could rest their feet on the sand without leaving the water completely, Olivia slipped from Jake's arms, regaining her balance on her own. With flushed cheeks, she quickly turned her back to adjust the top of her bikini, still feeling the adrenaline from the scare. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled the fabric back into place, trying to ignore the memory of the last wave that almost took her. However, before she could finish, the current gave one last unexpected push, throwing her against Jake. The impact was immediate, her body colliding against his in an unexpected embrace.
But the real shock came a second later, when she felt something pressing against her back that was definitely not just her cousin's firm abs. Heat rose to her face at the same time, and a chill ran down her spine. Jake, surprised, grabbed her by the arms to keep them from falling into the water together, but the proximity made time seem to slow down. Finally, she caught her breath and could feel his hand slowly sliding down her arm until it settled on her waist. The warm touch against her wet skin sent an involuntary shiver through her body. For a moment, she didn't know if the shortness of breath came from the fright, the tension, or the unexpected proximity. The silence between them lasted only a few seconds, but it was intense enough to feel like an eternity. To Jake's surprise, in the midst of the chaos of the waves, he felt Olivia's hand rest on his surfboard as he tried to regain his balance. Jake quickly pulled Olivia's jewelry box, which was small, to the side, and with his surfboard upright, he pierced Olivia's wave. The movement of the sea helped so that no one would notice the movement. A few minutes later, Olivia comes out of the sea and waits for Jake to lower his board to get out of the water. Olivia tells Emily that she almost drowned, but Jake was her superhero and saved her. They both went home, and when everyone was already asleep, Olivia sees the door opening where she and her sister were sleeping. It was Jake who arrived silently. Emily was already asleep in the bed next to her, and Olivia pretended to be asleep. To see what would happen, Jake went over to Olivia's bed, who was pretending to be asleep, and took out his wax and put it in Olivia's mouth first. She pretended to be asleep and just enjoyed Jake's wax going in and out. Then, with the light off, Jake went behind Olivia, who was still pretending to be asleep. Olivia was sleeping in a short dress. Jake only had to put Olivia's jewelry box aside again and put all his wax on Olivia, making gentle movements so that no one would wake her up until he had applied the wax well to Olivia. After finishing what he had to do, he went back to his room. Olivia turned over on her side in bed, but sleep just wouldn't come. The adrenaline of everything that had happened was overwhelming her, and her mind was spinning in a whirlwind of thoughts. She tried to close her eyes, but her restlessness only grew. It was as if something inside her hadn't been resolved, as if that night hadn't ended yet. Her heart was beating a little faster, and she realized there was no point in fighting that feeling. Without making a sound, she pushed the sheet aside and stood up, feeling the cold floor beneath her feet. The hallway was dark, but she knew the way well. Each step seemed to echo louder than it should, and for a moment she hesitated. She stopped in front of Jake's bedroom door, feeling her own breath catch in her throat. The doorknob seemed inviting and forbidden at the same time. She wondered if he was awake, and then, without thinking twice, she opened the door to Jake's room. She slowly pulled the sheet and began to thin Jake's wax, who woke up startled. Olivia put her hand over his mouth and said, "You're not done yet," and used her mouth to wet Jake's board. She, now without her bottom half, just sat on the board to enjoy the calm moment of the sea. Then she whispered in Jake's ear, "I want it at the back door." Jake remained still, and Olivia did all the work and could now go back to sleep peacefully. The next day, they all had breakfast together without even imagining everything that had happened the day before with Jake and Olivia. If you like this type of story, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and comment, and watch our latest video about my son's friend did something.